Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm AndyRC and today I'm going to be checking out the Tinyhawk 2 race, just as everybody else will be doing right at this moment. At a glance, it looks like a Tinyhawk 2 with the ducts removed, but I'd say it's actually closer to being the racing version of the Tinyhawk Freestyle released last August. So, compared to the ducted Tinyhawks, the motors are bigger with an 1103 sized stator, and actually compared to the Tinyhawk Freestyle, they have upped the KV slightly from 7,000 to 7,500. And the reason I think they have done this is because the Tinyhawk Freestyle swings the Avan Rush 2.5-inch props, but these are actually a 2-inch prop called the Avan Blur. And because they've gone with the higher quality Runcam Nano 2, its weight is actually not that different compared to the Tinyhawk Freestyle. So the dry weight of the race is 46 grams and the Freestyle is 50 grams. So I think when it comes to performance, the Freestyle could end up being faster than the race, because don't underestimate what half an inch can do in terms of performance. But perhaps they aren't competing with each other, and the idea is to have something with a smaller footprint in a race format that can use a higher quality camera and a more powerful VTX, because those were the main two complaints of the Freestyle. The bottom plate is made out of 2mm carbon. Subscribers to the channel will know that I'm not a fan of these strut-based arms on ultralight models because they disrupt the airflow and cause prop wash, which can't be tuned out when the LiPo is bottom mounted. The Tinyhawk Freestyle didn't suffer from prop wash, which I put down to the better weight distribution and balance with the LiPo being top mounted, and I think the larger props also played a part in that as well. So I'll be surprised if this race version doesn't suffer from a little bit of prop wash, but people tend not to care so much about prop wash when it comes to racing, as the end goal is to be the fastest and not the smoothest. The battery strap isn't the best quality, however it does its job by side mounting the LiPos, and you can't really have a high quality battery strap when you're trying to keep the weight down. Then there's a rubber mat to stop the LiPos getting thrown in a crash. Just like the Freestyle, they've gone with the same LiPo configuration, so you are given two of the 450 mAh 1S LiPos, which connect to a very robust solid pin PH2 connector. And you have to be careful with these connectors because they are a really tight fit, so make sure when you're disconnecting the LiPos that you don't pull them by the wires, otherwise you could end up ripping them out of the connector. On the plus side, if the battery strap and mat doesn't do its job, then there is no way any of these LiPos are going to get thrown out of that connector in a crash. Just like the Freestyle, you're given a plug if you want to run the model on a 1S, although the LiPo strap only just fits around a 1S LiPo, and it kind of gets in the way of the props. I should explain that originally the idea was to have this model as a 1 or 2S flyer, but the Emax pilots fed back that it was too sluggish on 1S. But the reason they are sticking with the PH2 format and not opting for an XT30 connector is because Emax have a loyal following, so a lot of their customers who will be buying this guy will have a load of these 450 mAh LiPos. And if it performs anything like the Freestyle, then the solid pin PH2 connector actually worked and it didn't suffer from a huge amount of voltage sag. Although Emax say you can add your own XT30 connector, and really I think they should include one in the package. The main all-in-one board has 5A BL Heli S4-in-1 ESCs and an F4 flight controller. It came flash with Betaflight version 4.1, and as you would expect, it's set up pretty perfect because Emax actually give them to pilots. Although there were a couple of things that I changed. Now they recommend not to change anything, but if you have more experience then I think it's fine to change a couple of things to your preference. The max arm angle was set to 60 90 degrees, which is fine, but I like to have it set to 180 degrees in case I get stuck in a tree, so I can sort of arm the model and wobble it out. The max arm angle is there so that you don't accidentally arm it if you are carrying the model and have left a LiPo plugged in, so the props don't nip you. There's no physical buzzer on this guy for obvious reasons, so they've set up D-Shot commands for a lost model alarm. However, RX lost wasn't checked, so I added that. There did used to be two PID and rate profiles for 1 and 2S on the very first CLI that I received. However, since the Emax pilot said 1S was no good, there is just one profile for 2S. But one thing I did change is the angle limit when in angle mode, because it's set to 25 degrees out of the box. And with this being an outdoor flyer, 25 degrees isn't going to be enough to combat a moderate wind, so I changed it to 50 degrees. The only other thing that I changed was adding the RSSI to the on-screen display, because the all-in-one board has a built-in SPI D8 FR-Sky receiver, so it should pick that telemetry up. There is a spare UART to add an external receiver, which I would recommend because the range of SPI receivers seems to vary, and the VTX is power switchable up to 200 milliwatts this time, which would be wasted by the 100 meter range or so of the SPI receivers. The VTX does come locked to 25 milliwatts and 25 channels out of the box, so be careful that you don't switch to a channel that is locked out, otherwise you won't pick up a signal. To unlock the VTX, you just have to press the button on the top while powering up the model, and the VTX supports smart audio, so you can switch the channels and the power via the on-screen display. There's no manual in the carry pouch this time. Going forward, all manuals will be online, and you're only given one set of props, so Emax, you need to provide a spare set. You're given a small screwdriver and a bunch of spare screws along with a USB charger. I have one gripe about the pouch, because something I've always loved about the Tinyhawk series is that you can just throw them in the pouch for storage, but the Tinyhawk Race doesn't fit in the pouch with the props on unless you remove the foam padding, so I just did that. Okay, let's go for a line of sight with this guy. Starting off in angle mode, and this is with the 2S configuration. Just ignore a little bit of snow that is coming down if you can. Yeah, it's been snowing quite a lot lately, which is why I'm a little bit rusty, to be honest, flying outside. This is really just to see how it sounds, so let's go for a punch with it. Oh, it's not bad. Oh, that snow is really coming down. This is why you haven't seen many reviews from me this part of the year, because the weather has just been absolutely diabolical. If we have not had storms, then we have had snow and rain. Oh, there we go. It just stops. We get all 4 seasons in the same day. Look, some blue sky over there. Anyways, meant to be about the model. Well, I'm not hearing any oscillations. In fact, can't really hear anything at all. It's such a quiet machine. So if it's quiet that you want, then this is your guy for sure. So let's take a look at some DVR footage. Somehow between the snow I managed to find some sun, and there is no jello coming from the camera whatsoever, which is always good news. As I suspected, the model doesn't have as much power as the Tinyhawk Freestyle. I'm flying in 8 mph winds here, which is the best it's been for a long time, yet I still had to have the camera angle really high to fight the wind, which is why I ended up butchering all of my inverted yaw spins. So apologies for that. Although it's been around 5 weeks since I've actually flown outside due to the storms, so I have to admit I'm a little bit rusty in general. So it doesn't exactly feel like a racer, and it does suffer from a little bit of prop wash when recovering from intense maneuvers. But as I said earlier, racing and freestyle have become two different types of craft, so it's not really meant to be flown as I'm flying it. I've also been told that the model flies better on the original 2-inch AVAM props that we first saw on the Baby Hawk, but unfortunately the weather hasn't been good enough for me to try them since I did this flight. On the plus side, it has the general Emax smoothness, which is hard to explain, but you can always tell when you're flying an Emax model. There's no noise feeding through to the video feed, and the voltage sag is acceptable, so it's not going to kill the included lipos. You might notice that I'm keeping the model in pretty close, even though the RSSI value is reading high, and this is because my controller was yelling out low RF signal, and it's set to 40 dB in my transmitter settings, so I think this is perhaps why the RSSI is turned off out of the box, because it doesn't seem to be accurate. The flight time was fairly decent. I pushed it too far because that's what I do, but don't you do that? It's probably best to land at around the 3-minute mark. So, with its slight lack of power outside, I decided to take it to an indoor sports hall where it was an absolute beast compared to any tiny whoop that was there or any fast brushless RC car. And I want to thank Phil for letting me chase his super fast brushless RC car. I'm telling you, we really need a drone drag racing league. It's pretty durable as well. I had a couple of massive crashes with it against the unforgiving tiles and walls, and there was no damage to the props or the model whatsoever. Turtle mode worked as well, and it comes set up with that in the modes tab. So there you go, that's my review of the Tinyhawk 2 race. I think in this difficult situation we're currently living in when it comes to multi-rotors, this model is almost invisible when it comes to its size and sound. So I think there is a lot of value in that. I don't know how much it's going to cost, so I'll put links in the video description if you wish to get one, as well as in a pinned comment. So I'll leave you with some flying, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.
Sometimes I have to keep on breathing in. My lungs are filled with too much pain. All the shadows